Well, hello all my friends, welcome back or welcome to the channel. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. My name is T and this is my channel, Crumbacy and Sewing. So in today's video, I'm going to continue the sew along for the Simplicity 8265. And today I'm going to be doing view A, which are the pants. I already did a sew along for view D, which is the jacket. And Crystal, she goes by Crystal Sews and Stuff. She did the sew alongs for views B and C. I'll make sure that I put the links to those videos in the description box below. Please make sure that you go over to Crystal's channel and subscribe to her channel, and also watch the videos for these two views if you are interested and you haven't done so already. So this is the first episode of Crystal and I's series, and this series is called the Sew Wardrobe Series. And this is the first pattern. So if you're tuning in for the first time, this is the first pattern of the series that we are going to be sewing. So we're going to also include other sewing patterns down the line as we continue to develop this series throughout the rest of the year. So stay tuned. So let's go ahead and get to this sew along for view A. So as you can see, I already took the opportunity to cut out all my pattern pieces, and they are not that many pattern pieces to this pattern. For this particular pattern and for view A, for the pair of pants, you only need 3 pieces, and those pieces consist of the front, the back, and the casing. So it's very simple, very beginner friendly, and I'm going to go ahead and take you into the process of sewing this. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to check and double check and make sure before we go on and sew anything or assemble the garment, just make sure that you have this piece here, which is number 3. This is the casing, and the casing is for views A and B. And again, we're doing view A. So you need 2 pieces that is cut on the straight of the grain. So your arrows indicate how you're going to place your pattern on your fabric. So make sure that you cut 2 of these pieces, and also make sure that you clip all your notches. So in your fabric, you want to make sure that you go ahead and you clip notches where you see notches there. So I know for those of you who are beginners, you are probably tempted to overlook all these little symbols and these notches. Don't do that, because later on you will regret it if you don't put those notches in your garment. So don't bypass that particular step. Just make sure that you go ahead and clip your notches. And then on your band, this casing, I'm also going to refer to it as a band because it's a waistband. You're going to see these little dots on the side as well. Make sure you transfer that to your fabric as well, because that's going to tell you where you're going to stop and start your stitches so that you can insert your elastic. You're going to leave an opening here, and your elastic is going to get fed through these 2 dots here. So make sure that you transfer those dots as well, so you know where to stitch your waistband in place and where to stop. You also want to make sure that you have 2 mirrored images of your back piece. So you're going to cut your back piece twice, and you're going to cut your front piece twice as well. So I'll show you what those pieces look like so you're not confused, because I'm working with black fabric. You might not be able to see what these pieces look like. Okay, so here is the back piece here. And as you can see with the back piece going down the length of the back here and also the crotch area, you'll see 3 notches or symbols here. Make sure you clip those little notches inside your fabric, because that's going to tell you how to put the back pieces together. You also have a notch on the side on the inseam of the leg here. Make sure that, well, where the inseam will go in between the legs here, and make sure you clip the notch there. Then up at the waist here, there's a little notch or a little symbol here. You're going to go ahead and clip that. You have a dart here. Make sure you trace your dart, and I'll show you what my dart looks like so that you know how to trace that on your pants. You're going to trace this on the left and the right of the back pant leg. And then you have a notch that's on the outer leg, which is near the thigh or the hip area. So make sure you clip that as well. So let me show you what the front pattern piece look like. Okay, so here is your front pattern piece here. Just make sure, again, you find these notches and you clip those notches inside your fabric. On the front along the crotch area here, you'll see you have 2 notches instead of 3. So there's going to be 2 notches for the front and 3 notches for the back. So that way we won't get confused. And then there's a notch on the waist as well. So these notches here up at the waist, that's going to tell you where you're going to put your band. Because remember, we have notches that we placed on our band as well. So with all of that said, we can go ahead and move along and we can go ahead and start sewing. But before we do that, I just wanted to say real quickly, also this pattern, it has a short and lengthened line as well as a petite line. So I use the petite line, and you can't really see it here because I went ahead and I folded it already. I made that adjustment. But the petite line, I think if you raise that up, it raises the pant leg up about 2 1/4 of an inch or something like that. And that's what I did because I am very short in the legs. So if you are short, or if you're tall, you may want to go ahead and shorten or lengthen your pattern before you assemble your pattern together. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the darts in place. So as you can see here, I already assembled one of the darts together. And so this is what your dart should look like. On your pattern, you'll have 3 dots. On your pattern, you'll have 3 dots here that's on the back of your pants. And I like to actually draw my darts on the wrong side of the fabric because it's easier to work with. So you just go ahead, you'll see those dots that's on the back of the pant, and you're just going to go ahead and put those darts on, and you'll use a ruler and you'll trace that line out there. Go ahead and match the dart here, the dot at the bottom to the dot that's up here at the top, and you're just going to go ahead and trace that in. And after you do that, you just want to go ahead and close that dart up. And you want to try to the best of your ability to make sure that the line of the dart in the back matches the line of the dart in the front here. And then you just go ahead and you pin those together. And like I said, you want to make sure that those lines are pretty accurate, or touching one another. So I just use my pen to kind of locate to make sure that that the dart is pretty even from front to back. So you just go ahead and continue to pin those in place. So we're just going to go ahead and continue to pin this dart in place. Again, making sure that the front of the dart and the back of the dart match one another. And you'll notice that the dart, it tapers to basically nothing. So the dart is just meant to give you a little bit of shaping in the back there, at the waist area, and then it just tapers down to nothing. You're going to go ahead and you're going to stitch that dart down in place. Okay, so the darts are in now. Now I want to tell you a few things that we should do here now that the darts are in. We want to make sure that after we have sewn the darts, we press the darts laying flat towards the center back or the crotch area. So this is the crotch area here. And the center back, we want to make sure that we press the dart going toward the center back here. The other thing that I want to note here is instead of back stitching, because you'll notice if you back stitch, sometimes you'll get a little bubble at the end of your dart. To avoid getting that bubble, all you have to do is once you finish sewing your dart in, do not back stitch at the end of your dart. Leave a long tail of thread here, and then you take those two threads and you open up those threads and then you make a knot just like that, and then you go ahead and you cut that thread off. So that will help to prevent that bubble in the back. All right, so now with that done, we're going to go ahead and take our back pieces here and we're going to lay them flat on the table. Make sure that the right side is facing up. So here we have the two crotch areas here facing towards one another. And we're going to take our front section or our front piece and we're going to, with right sides, so we're going to take the front piece, take one piece of the front piece and lay it with right sides together on top of the back section. And we're going to do the same thing for this side as well. With right sides facing, we're going to go ahead and lay the front on top of the back. Now, we're going to work with the inner seam first. We're going to create the inner seam first on the leg here. So we're going to go ahead and pin this together. So we're going to find our notches. And we're going to go ahead and take the top of the crotch area of the back and the top of the crotch area of the front. We're going to place that together and secure that with a pin. And then you go ahead and find your notch and you match your notches up. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to match it at the notch there. And then we're going to go all the way down to the bottom. And we're going to match the bottom of the back to the bottom of the front where the hem would go. And then everything in between, we're going to go ahead and pin that in place. Okay, so that is the inner seam here. This is where the inner seam is going to go, and that is where the crotch line is. Now we're going to go ahead and work on the outer seam, and that's going to be where the hip line is and the outer leg. And we're going to do the same thing. we're going to go ahead and match the bottom of the pant leg front with the bottom of the pant leg of the back. Secure it with a pin. We're going to go ahead and find those notches, and we're going to line those up. So here's the notch of the front and a notch of the back. We're going to go ahead and line those up and put a pin in it. And we're going to go ahead and find the top of the waist of the back and the top of the waist of the front. And we're going to go ahead and match that up as well and put a pin in it. And now we're just going to go ahead and pin everything in between. Okay, so now that we have it all pinned together, this is what it should look like. So you're going to do the same thing for this next set as well. So just make sure that you match up your notches here. Match up the top of the waistline for the back and the front together. Match the top of the crotch of the front and the back together as well. Just make sure that you go ahead and match all the important points together, and then go ahead and pin everything in between. We're going to go ahead and take this to the machine, and we're going to sew this at 5/8 inch seam allowance on the inner part of the leg and also on the outer part. We're going to go ahead and sew both of these at 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now that we have both our right and our left side of the pant leg sewn together, we can go ahead and we can press the seams open. And I already did that, but I'm going to show you here. You want to go ahead and lay your garment flat, and you can use a tailor's ham to put the tailor's ham inside here of the pant leg, and you go ahead and you press that so that it lays nice and flat and open, because you want the outside seam to look really nice and crisp. You don't want it to bulge up like that. All right, so do that on all four sides. So you should do that on both the inner seam leg as well as on the outer seams. So go ahead and do that. After we go ahead and press those open, we're going to go ahead and we're going to trim back some of the seam allowance. Now, you could do this one or two ways. You can either just go ahead and use a rotary blade or scissors and just go ahead and trim that off. Or if you're going to go ahead and serge your pant leg anyway, you can trim off the excess seam allowance using your blade on your overlocker or your serger. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to trim it back with my shears here. And we're going to do this for all four sides. We're going to do it for the inseam as well as for the outer seam. Okay, so now that these are all nice pressed and trimmed, we can go ahead and finish the edges of the seam allowance here. Now you can use your overlocker. If you have an overlocker, you could do a zigzag stitch. You can use pinking shears. It's really just all up to you. I'm going to use my overlocker for a nice clean finish, but you can definitely either, especially if you're working with a ponte knit, you can just go ahead and leave it like this if you want, because it's not going to fray over time. And really, I think that's what you should be working with, because the pattern calls for view A here. We're working with double knits here for views A. So double knit, interlock, jacquard, jersey, or any kind of ponte knit is appropriate for view A. And so with knits, they don't, depending on what kind of knit you're working with, they're not going to unravel over time or fray, so you don't really have to worry about that. But definitely go ahead and serge or pink or zigzag stitch, or whatever finishing method you're going to do. Go ahead and do that right now. And we're going to do that on the outer seam allowance area here, and also on the inner for both legs. Okay, so now that we have the inside of the garment finished, so this is what my finishing looks like. You're going to go ahead and you're going to press your seam again. So a lot of pressing when we're sewing pants. You're going to go ahead and press your seam again towards the back. So here's the dart here, and you can see the notches back here as well. And you're going to go ahead and press your seams towards the back. Always press your seams towards the back. You're going to go ahead and you're going to take the left leg and the right leg. After you press your seams towards the back, you're going to take your left leg and your right leg, and you're going to go ahead and match the inner seam of the leg on the left to the inner seam of the leg on the right. And you're going to go ahead and put those together and pin it in place. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to find our notches. So remember, I said those notches are going to be very important. So here, this is the back. As you can see, we have 3 notches on each individual piece. We're going to go ahead and put those notches together just like that. And we're going to go ahead and pin that in place. We're going to find the top of our waist here. So here's the left side of the back, and here's the right side of the back. We're going to go ahead and pin that in place up at the top. And remember to pin everything in between as well. So we're going to go ahead and pin everything in between. Now we're going to move on to the front section. We're going to find our notches again. So on the front, remember there are 2 notches. So there's 2 notches for the left and 2 notches for the right. We're going to go ahead and pin those together. We're going to match them and pin them together. And then pin everything in between our 2 pinned areas. We're going to go ahead and find that top waistline area for the front on the left and the right, and we're going to go ahead and pin those together as well. And now when we take this to the machine, we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch this crotch area at 5/8 inch seam allowance as well. Okay, so now we should have a seam going down the center back and the crotch of the pants, going through the crotch to the center front. And after we put that seam there, we want to go ahead and we want to press the seam open. Always press your seams open because it gives you a nice professional look on the outside. You can see crisp lines on the outside of your garment, and it just looks so nice and so clean. So make sure you press that down, and you can see mine's is laying flat here. So I've already pressed my seam here. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to trim this seam here. And I like to trim my seam back by 1/2 inch, and sometimes I like to go down even to 1/4 inch. It just depends on whether or not I'm using the blade on my serger or not. Today I'm gonna just go ahead and trim it back by about 1/2 inch. Just make sure you are careful when you are trimming your garment, especially if you're not using like a rotary blade. If you're doing this freehand, like I'm doing right here with the scissors, you just want to make sure that your garment is out of the way and you're only cutting this seam allowance here. I've had many instances where I actually cut my garment because I was not paying attention. So just make sure when you are doing this freehand that you have your garment out of the way and you're only cutting your seam here. Okay, so that is done. So I'm gonna go ahead and overlock this, and then when I serge that together, I'm gonna go ahead and press that going towards the left of the garment. All right, so let's sit that to the side for a minute. So just make sure before going to this next step that you finish your seam. All right, so for this next step here, we are going to go ahead and we're going to put the band together before attaching it to the waistline of the pants. So you should have 2 pieces cut on, or actually it's not going to unfold. So you should have 2 pieces cut twice. And as you can see here, I just went ahead and I marked where the center front of my band is going to go. There is no notch here for the center front here, but there are notches on the side of the center front. But I just made a little chalk line here just to give me an idea of where that center front is going to go. And that is going to line right up on that seam of the center front. So I like to do that as well. So now we're going to take our pieces here. And remember, we put 2 dots on the side here. It's probably best to put them on the wrong side of the fabric. So that way, when you actually face your 2 waistband pieces together, you know where those 2 dots are. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put these 2 bands together with right sides facing. And on this side here, you can see I did mark it on the wrong side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find my notch for both pieces, and I'm going to align them together and put them together like that. And I'm going to go ahead and stick a pin in that. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin on the edge. I'm going to put a pin on top of this first dot here. And then I'm going to put a pin on top of this second dot. Now, when we stitch, we want to stitch this first section of the waistband piece at 5/8 inch, and we're going to stop at this dart, and we're going to stop at this dot, and we're going to back stitch. Then we're going to go ahead and lift our needle up, and then we're going to place our needle on this second dot. We're going to back stitch, and then we're going to go ahead and continue our stitching line to the end of the waistband here. Just make sure that this section right here is left open, because that's where we're going to insert our elastic band. On this side here, on the other side of the waistband, we're just going to go ahead and find our notch. So we're going to put our notches together. And we're going to go ahead and stick a pin right where that notch is. And we're going to continue to pin this entire side of the waistband. And we're going to sew this side of the waistband at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. This side of the waistband does not need to have an opening. We just need one side of the waistband to have an opening to put that elastic in. So go ahead and stitch that together, and then come back and I will tell you what we will do next. Okay, so I went ahead and I serged the inside of the seam for the center back and front and the crotch area. So that's all serged, and I press the seam toward the left as I mentioned before. Also stitch the band in place. Here's a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance here for the first part of the band, so we'll call that the left side. And then on the right side of the band here, as I mentioned before, I left a little opening here so that we can feed the elastic in through this opening. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and trim back some of that seam allowance. Okay, so now that the seam allowance is trimmed back, we can go ahead and we can place the band together by folding it. So we're going to go ahead and fold the band at the side seam here. We're going to go ahead and fold it in half, and you're going to do that for the entire band. So we're going to fold the opposite side in half as well at the side seams, and you should have a band that is half the size of what we started with. Now for beginners, if this is your first time sewing a band together, you may want to go ahead and baste this together so that it does not move, or you can pin it together. Just make sure that you align your notches with one another. So find all your notches and your side seams and just go ahead and pin those together. Again, you can go ahead and take that to the machine and you can baste it together. If you feel confident not to do that, you don't have to do that. So now remember, I marked the center front so that I can actually tell what's the center front. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place the band on the center front, and you'll know the center front from the center back, because remember, the back has darts in the back. So these are the darts. So we're going to place this here on the center front. So right on that center front seam. And we're going to go ahead and pin that in place. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to find the notch of the front and match that with the notch of the band. And we're going to go ahead and pin that in place. On the opposite side, we should have a notch, and we're going to go ahead and put the notch of the band on directly on top of the notch of the front of the garment. And we're going to do the same thing for the back. We're going to find the notches and match those up. One thing that I forgot to mention is you see this this hole here where we're going to insert the elastic. Make sure that that is facing the inner part of your garment. So you want that to be on the inside of your garment. Now let's see where the side seam is for the other side of the pants. We're going to go ahead and put the side seam together on the other side as well, directly on top of one another, just like that. Pin it in place. And now we're going to go ahead and pin everything in between. You'll notice that in the front, when you attach your waistband to the front, you'll notice that there is a little bit more extra fabric on the pants in the front than there is in the back. And the directions on the tissue paper actually tells you that you need to stretch for the front only. So you will need to stretch a little bit, stretch your waistband out a little bit in order for the front section to fit the band properly. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and take that to the machine, and we're going to stitch that at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Before you trim your band and also serge the inside, make sure you press this flat. You want to make sure that this is nice and flat and that you can see this seam here that is really nice and crisp. So make sure that you go ahead and you press that. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to trim back some of this seam allowance and then finish off the edge of the seam there. For the elastic, we're going to be using a 1.5 inch wide elastic, and the directions for this pattern says to measure your waist. So you take the elastic and you wrap the elastic around your waist, and wherever it sits comfortably, that's where you're going to go ahead and measure that at, and then you're going to add an additional inch to that. So it's going to be your measurements plus an additional inch. So that's what I already did. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut that off, and I am going to insert the elastic inside of the pants, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But first, I want to tell you real quickly, the elastic, once we insert the elastic inside of the channel of the pants, we're going to overlap the elastic. And the elastic needs to be sewn. You can sew the elastic one or two ways. You can either do a zigzag stitch at the edge here of your elastic band when you overlap it. You could do a zigzag stitch in the middle to secure the middle, and then also at the edge on the underside. Or what is commonly done is a little rectangle or a box, and you put an X in that box and you stitch going along the lines of the box and on the outside of the box as well. So you can do that one or two ways. Just make sure that you overlap your waistband by at least an inch. I use a safety pin, but you can use whatever tool or mechanism that you like. Okay, so here is what your elastic band should look like, something similar to this. I use zigzag stitches. You don't really have to use a zigzag stitch, especially if you are going to be sewing on a cross here, but I like to do the zigzag stitch just to secure it. And as you can see at the end of each point here, I back stitched as well, securing that stitch in place. So that way when it pulls, it'll have extra stability at the end there. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and just feed the elastic through the pants here. So now that we have the band inside of the pants, we could go ahead and we can stitch this opening closed. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna stitch this closed using a slip stitch. Now you'll notice that the pants, they look like they have gathers in the front of them. But if you have inserted your elastic based on your measurements and the band actually fits your waist, when you put your band on, it should stretch out and you won't see those gathers when you're wearing them. And hopefully I can show you my pictures and then you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and stitch this closed. So just get a needle and a thread. Make sure that you put, you know, some thread on a needle. Tie a knot at the end of your thread. And we're gonna go ahead and we're going to slip stitch this closed. Here, we're just going to go ahead and make a knot. And we can clip the thread off. So that completes that chapter of the pants. And now all we have to do is hem the bottom of the pants. So this is probably the most dreadful part of it for me because I don't really like hemming, but it's also easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we serge or overcast or zigzag stitch, whatever finishing you want. Go ahead and finish the edge of your pants here, and you're going to turn them inward about 1 inch. So I usually go rogue when it comes to my hems. I usually don't follow the instructions. You are more than welcome to follow the instructions, but what I did is I marked the inside of my pant leg here at 2 inches. So I don't know if you can see that chalk line, but I used my seam gauge and I marked it for 2 inches. And then I took the serged in of the bottom of my pant leg and I brought that in up to the line that I made. So that gives me a 1 inch seam line. And then I turned that in and I pressed it with my yarn. And now I'm going to go ahead and top stitch that in place, making sure that I catch this seam here, making sure that I catch the edge of the hem. So let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and take this to the machine and we're going to stitch that in place, making sure that you catch the edge of your hem. Okay, so here is the finished hem of the pant leg. So again, I just turned that under. So originally I made a 2-inch mark, a line, and I bought the edge of this finished edge here up to that line. So really it's just a 1-inch hem, but I stitched it in place at 7/8 of an inch on that plate, catching the back of the finished edge here. So the stitching, you can't really see the stitching, but it's inside the serge pieces here. The serged edge is inside the serged edge there. So it gives it a nice little clean finish on the inside there. So yeah, so that is it for this tutorial. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please make sure that you give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can receive notifications of all my videos when I post them. All right, and also don't forget to go over and check out Crystal's tutorial today. She also posted a tutorial of the top. I'll make sure that I put that in the link down below, so check the description box so that you can find all of the tutorials and the sew-alongs that are pertaining to the Simplicity 8265. All right, everyone, I had so much fun doing both of these tutorials. I hope that you can get some enjoyment out of them and learn lots. Please make sure that you leave me comments in the comment section below and let me know how you like these videos. All right, everyone, until next time, stay creative. Bye.